Indy NXT, previously known as the Indy Lights series, is the last step on the road to Indy, where young drivers go on their journey to the pinnacle of American open-wheel racing, the NTT IndyCar Series. And just like IndyCar, the next series has had quite the storied and messy history, dating back to the birth of modern-day IndyCar. In the 50s and 60s, no such thing as the next series existed, with drivers coming into the then USAC-sanctioned IndyCar Series being of dirt racing backgrounds, where they started in quarter midget cars, racing on dirt ovals, graduating to midget cars, moving on to sprint cars still on dirt ovals, and then finally to Indy cars, which back in those days were much similar looking to sprint cars than their modern day counterparts. The large list of drivers which took this route into IndyCar include pretty much every driver in the 50s and 60s, with the few exceptions being a few Formula 1 drivers such as Jim Clark and Graham Hill, who made the trip across the pond to attempt the 500 in the late 60s. In the late 60s and early 70s, when IndyCar moved away from dirt and towards more asphalt and road course based racing, the feeder series made the same shift, with drivers still coming in through dirt racing, but more road racing oriented junior series such as Formula Super Vs and Formula Atlantic, the modern equivalent of such would be Formula 3, feeding in drivers to the series. The first feeder series with a link to IndyCar would come around in 1977, with the USAC sanctioned Mini Indy Series running its first season that year. The Mini Indy Series was a Formula Super V based championship, with its main driver pool being up-and-coming future IndyCar drivers. All 4 races of that season were support races for the 77 IndyCar season, with even some IndyCar regulars participating in some of the races, showing that this just wasn't any junior series, but one for up-and-coming drivers with serious ambitions of one day competing in IndyCar to hone their skills racing against the best. Over the course of the Mini Indy Series' life, it fostered many future drivers, such as 1978 champion Bill Alsop, who went on to earn the 1979 CART Rookie of the Year award, and 1979 champion Dennis Firestone, being crowned the 1980 CART Rookie of the Year, and having a 9-year-long career in CART in the 80s. The first IndyCar split in 1979 and 1980 between USAC and CART ended in CART taking control of IndyCar, and USAC only sanctioning events at the IMS. The Mini Indy Series was a victim of this, and it was ended after the 1980 season, and in its absence, the previous system of a variety of junior series feeding IndyCar new drivers returned, with dirt racing, Super Vs, Atlantics, stock cars, and Formula 1 all being the origin of many CART drivers during the 80s. Emerson Fittipaldi, Roberto Moreno, and Derek Daly all being F1 drivers who forged their careers in the European-based racing series, before then switching to competing in IndyCar during the early to mid-80s. CART, recognizing the need for a more organized feeder system for IndyCar, started the generically named American Racing Series in 1986, for the purpose of having a more IndyCar-centric junior series than the scattered collection of them in years past. The ARS was a spec series, with all teams using modified March Formula 3000 chassis and Buick V6 engines, and its first champion in 1986 was former F1 driver Fabrizio Barbaza, with 1991 CART Rookie of the Year Jeff Andretti coming in second. The series obtained sponsorship from Firestone and was renamed to Indy Lights for the 1991 season and switched to Lola chassis for 1992. In 1993, there was a B Series championship held, with older March chassis being used instead of Lolas, which was won by dentist and future backmarker Jack Miller, but due to its low driver count and low interest, was never run again. Throughout its many years, the series hosted many future IndyCar stars, such as Paul Tracy winning the championship in 1990, Brian Herta winning it in 1993, Tony Kanaan winning it in 1997, and Cristiano D'Amata winning it in 98. Most Indy Lights races were companion ones, the kart races, and when not a companion race, almost all tracks raced at were kart ones, with some notable exceptions being when the series ran in support of Petit Le Mans and for the IRL race at Kansas in 2001. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the presence of Indy Lights began to wane when the increasing relevance of kart's rival series in the second Indy split, IRL, and another junior series, the Toyota Atlantic Championship, proved as alternate ways for drivers to get into IndyCar. Kart ended Indy Lights after the 2001 season, and the Toyota Atlantic Series became the de facto second-tier series for kart. For 2002, the Infinity Pro Series was started by the IRL as its official second-tier series, with teams running spec Dallara chassis and Infinity V8 engines. The first season in 2002 was off to a rocky start, with only 8 drivers running the full 7-round schedule, and only 10 drivers showing up for some races. And AJ Foyt IV was crowned the champion at the end of the year. The 2003 season was a lot more successful, with many more drivers participating in the 13-race-long season, with a new centerpiece event, a 100-mile race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval called the Freedom 100, being added to the schedule. The championship that year was won by Mark Taylor, who later went on to drive in the IRL for the 04 season. For 2004, the Pro Series adopted Menards sponsorship, becoming known as the Menards Infinity Pro Series, and in 2005, the series added a few road course races to the schedule, and this increased interest in the previously obscure series, with names such as Marco Andretti running part-time road course only schedules, helping draw attention to the series. In 2006, prize money for the championship was increased, and this justifiably drew a lot more interest in the series, with upwards of 15 cars now showing up for each race on the schedule, which was changed to have a half-oval, half-road course distribution, with most races being companion ones to IRL races. Menards and Infinity discontinued their sponsorship that year, and the series became just known as the Indy Pro Series from that on. Throughout all of this, the Toyota Atlantic Championship had been running as kart's main junior series, with names such as Buddy Rice and AJ Allmendinger winning the championship, and when kart rebranded to Champ Car in 2003, it made the Atlantic Championship its official feeder series, giving junior drivers the same choice as the ones in the split a decade earlier: stay in the established championship, the Atlantic Series, which had been running since the 70s, and graduate to Champ Car, or go into the new and maybe more lucrative Indy Pro Series, which what it didn't have in precedent, it had in promise, as it was the route to the now more prosperous IRL, which had taken the upper hand in the Indy split, with Champ Car going into a state of decline. In 2008, Champ Car was sold to the IRL, and IndyCar became one once again, and the Indy Pro Series took the Indy Lights name and became the official junior series to the now named IndyCar Series, while the Atlantic Championship was left to the wind for SCCA to take sanctioning duties for, never returning to its former prestige of being the final step into the top tier for American open-wheel racing. The years after the split were pretty peaceful for Indy Lights, with Firestone being the main sponsor, and future IndyCar winners such as J.R. Hildebrand and Joseph Newgarden winning the championship. Cooper Tires took over sponsorship duties from Firestone for 2014, and a new chassis and engine combo were introduced for the 2015 season with the goal of reducing costs, the engine being a turbocharged MCR4 cylinder capable of producing 450 horsepower, and the chassis being the all-new Dallara IL-15. Quite a few future IndyCar drivers continue to come out of the series, with Pato O'Ward winning the championship in 2018 and Oliver Askew winning it in 2019. For the start of the 2020 season, Only 10 drivers and 4 teams showed up for the first practice session at St. Petersburg, and this, combined with the onset of the pandemic that year, led to the cancellation of the rest of the 2020 Indy Lights Series. The 2021 season had better driver count, with 15 full-time drivers contesting the return of the series, and future IndyCar winner Kyle Kirkwood winning the championship and using the prize money to get himself a ride the next year in the main series. For 2022, Firestone announced they would return to sponsoring the next year, and IndyCar would take over sole sanctioning duties from the previous co-sanctioner, Anderson Promotions. This in limbo sort of season led to the eventual champion Linus Lundqvist receiving not as much prize money as champions of years past, and so he wasn't able to get a full-time ride for 2023, but has gotten a part-time seat, taking Connor Daly's seat at Meyershank Racing. For the 2023 season, the series has rebranded as the Firestone Indy NXT Series, and the prize system has been reworked so that a Lundqvist type situation won't happen again, marking the most recent, but just one of the many times the second tier series has changed in some way. From the original Mini Indy Series, to the American Racing Series, to Indy Lights and the Toyota Atlantic Series, to the Infinity Pro Series, Indy Pro Series, back to the Indy Lights name, and now the very next iteration into the future, Indy NXT. And this wraps up the very messy history of the Indy NXT Series and its many iterations from the 70s to the present. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, like it. If you like the content I put out, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.